Ruby Dawn woke before sunrise, her stomach fluttering like a trapped moth because today her dad would finally stand trial in front of the whole town. The 11-year-old tied her frizzy ponytail, slipped on her jean jacket, and whispered a promise to the golden retriever at her feet. "Scout, today we show them the truth," she said, rubbing the dog's velvety ears until he grumbled happily. Scout thumped his tail, catching the nervous energy in the room. 2 months earlier, someone had stolen Mrs. Pennington's antique pocket watch, and neighbors blamed Ruby's dad because he once fixed her fence. With no fingerprints, the police still arrested him when a rusty latch lay near his toolbox, and rumors grew wild. Ruby knew her dad would never steal, so she built a secret plan with the only partner she fully trusted, even if that partner preferred chasing tennis balls. For weeks after school, she hid in the barn training Scout, turning ordinary gestures into secret commands. A twitch of her wrist meant sit, a tap on her knee meant search, and a tiny thumb twist meant reveal. Ruby even practiced in front of the cracked mirror, timing each move until Scout reacted faster than a video game hero facing the final boss. Now the plan had to unfold inside the stone courthouse that towered over Maple Street like a gray castle. Ruby clipped a blue service dog vest onto Scout, checked the silver buckle twice, and tucked a folded sheet of paper into the side pouch containing phone photos, timestamps, and scribbled facts. The paper held her handwritten timeline, names, dates, and doodled arrows connecting clues, collected while adults dismissed her as a shy kid who never spoke up. As sunlight painted the barn door gold, her grandma honked the truck horn, signaling it was time to leave and daring any last-minute fears to follow. Ruby and Scout climbed into the cab. The dog's breath fogged the window, drawing a heart that faded fast. The town square buzzed with reporters and neighbors whispering like bees around a shaken hive. Ruby steadied herself with the rhythm of Scout's breathing, counting each inhale like steps toward the truth, convincing herself that bravery could be measured in breaths. When they reached the courthouse steps, a bailiff tried to stop them, but Grandma waved the official service animal letter like a knight's shield. Inside, dress shoes echoed on marble floors like distant drums leading them toward a fate she refused to dodge. Ruby squeezed Scout's leash and reminded herself that courage sometimes comes on 4 paws. Judge Barrett entered the courtroom with a stack of heavy files that seemed to pull his shoulders lower than usual. The tall man adjusted his glasses and looked over the rim of the crowd, searching for order among the gathered faces. Reporters rustled notepads, eager for a dramatic headline, while Mrs. Pennington clutched a lace handkerchief like it was her last hope. Ruby sat beside her father at the defense table, hands folded, voice locked behind her lips, as always whenever strangers stared at her. Scout lay at her feet, eyes bright, tail still, perfectly playing the role of calm service dog, even though every muscle hummed with readiness. The prosecutor, Mr. Harrow, rose like a crow stretching its wings, and began painting Ruby's dad as a greedy handyman who saw a chance and took it. Ruby flinched at each harsh word but kept her face smooth, for she could not afford to look scared. She touched Scout's collar twice, a signal that meant stay alert during practice runs in the barn. Mr. Harrow called his first witness, Mr. Blakely, the neighbor whose yard shared a fence with Mrs. Pennington's garden. Blakely swaggered to the stand and swore to tell the truth, though his shifty eyes flicked to the cameras after every sentence. He claimed he saw Ruby's father slip into the old lady's shed late at night, pocket watch shining under the moonlight like a stolen star, and that he heard the faint click of the clasp as proof. Gasps fluttered through the benches, and even the judge leaned forward, eyebrow raised. Ruby knew the story was made of fog. She had been up finishing homework that same night and saw no one leave the house. She needed proof, but children were rarely allowed to speak, especially children who fell silent when pushed. That is why she had turned her dog into a walking witness stand. Ruby slid her shoe forward and tapped Scout's paw once, another quiet cue, telling him to take note of Mr. Blakely's words. The dog's ears twitched, his nose lifted slightly, and his tail made one slow sweep, as if storing the scent of every lie for later use in some canine courtroom. Across the aisle, Mrs. Pennington sniffed back tears, confused yet certain about her stolen heirloom. Ruby glanced at her dad. He offered a weak smile, trusting his daughter's mysterious plan, though she had shared only bits and pieces. Judge Barrett banged the gavel for silence, declaring the next phase of testimony would begin right after a short recess, giving everyone time to breathe and Ruby a moment to think. When the judge disappeared into his chambers, the buzz of human voices filled the room like the roar of distant waves. Bailiffs opened a side door so people could stretch, but Ruby stayed seated, heart thumping like drumsticks on a desk. She leaned closer to Scout and brushed her hand across her shoelace, the cue for phase one of their plan. Scout rose smoothly, vest catching the fluorescent lights, and walked forward as if he simply needed a drink of water. In reality, the dog's nose swept the floorboards, collecting invisible clues the same way magnets pick up iron shavings, reading scents ordinary noses never notice. Ruby watched Mr. Blakely step off the witness stand and slip into the hallway, touching his blazer pocket as though guarding treasure. She bit her lip. That pocket watch had a very sharp cinnamon and brass smell, something she knew Scout could track easily. The bailiff noticed Scout roaming and asked Ruby if she needed help, but she pointed to the posted service dog sign and shrugged. Scout circled the wooden rail, paused where Blakely had stood, and sneezed, a tiny puff that meant target located, the coded reply drilled during moonlit barn sessions. He then trotted to the hallway entrance, sniffed again, and sat, eyes glued to the door the lying neighbor had just used. Ruby's pulse fluttered. The clues were lining up like neat rows of code in her computer class. Grandma leaned over the gallery rail and mouthed, "You okay?" Ruby nodded, tapping her fingers in a silent pattern that translated as, "Trust the dog?" Across the aisle, Mrs. Pennington dabbed her eyes, still convinced of her own memory, yet unsure why the girl seemed hopeful. Reporters whispered theories, one scribbling the headline, "Canine Chaos Expected in Afternoon Session," though none guessed that a simple golden retriever would soon outsmart every adult present. Ruby reached into her backpack and pulled out a small click-pin flashlight, another tool in her evidence kit. She clicked it twice, Scout signaled to return, then hid the light before guards could see the quick flash. The dog patted back, settling at her feet with a satisfied huff that smelled faintly of hallway dust and victory. His tail brushed Ruby's ankle, reminding her that step 1 was complete and step 2 would be far bolder. She focused on steady breathing, counting 4 seconds in and 4 seconds out, because the next time the gavel struck, everything would change. The courtroom doors swung open, and Judge Barrett returned holding mint tea that chased the old paper scent from his robes, but calm would soon vanish. Everyone hurried to their seats, the scraping of wooden benches echoing like sliding sleds on ice. Judge Barrett tapped the microphone, his voice spilling through speakers as he announced the recess was over and testimony would continue. Ruby inhaled, lifted her index finger, and rubbed the side seam of her jeans, Scout's cue for Phase 2. The dog rose, trotted toward the witness stand, and sat beneath it as though drawn by pure curiosity. Mr. Harrow frowned, glancing at the judge, but Barrett waved for him to proceed, insisting the animal seemed harmless. The prosecutor called Mrs. Pennington, hoping a tearful story would seal his case, and the frail woman shuffled forward, clutching her handkerchief. She spoke of birthdays, family dinners, and the watch her late husband had carried through the war, her voice a trembling ribbon that tied the past to the present. While the courtroom leaned into the nostalgia, Scout began to sniff the lower shelf of the wooden stand, tail low, body taut like a coiled spring. Ruby's heart hammered. She twisted her thumb behind her back, the hidden command for reveal. Scout nudged a loose floorboard, lifted it, and revealed a velvet pouch. Gasps rippled as the golden retriever gently pulled out the small velvet bag, the drawstring still tied, and laid it on the polished hardwood. Judge Barrett stood, eyes wide. Mr. Harrow sputtered, and Mr. Blakely paled to the color of chalk dust. Mrs. Pennington pressed a hand over her heart, recognizing the pouch even before Ruby's dad dared to believe it. The judge signaled a bailiff to collect the item, and the pouch was carried, almost ceremoniously, to the bench. Barrett opened it, and a gleam of brass and tiny diamonds winked under the court's bright lights, the missing pocket watch unharmed. Scout sat proudly, tail thumping once, head tilted, as if delivering a long-awaited homework assignment and daring anyone to question his credentials. For a full 5 seconds no one spoke, the silence thick enough to hear Scout's gentle panting and the distant tick of the courthouse clock marking history. Then the judge's voice cracked the stillness. Where did the dog learn that board was loose, and why was the watch hidden there? Ruby locked eyes with him, ready to let the final part of her plan unfold. Judge Barrett cleared his throat and asked Ruby to explain, his voice sounding less stern and more curious now. Ruby stood, knees knocking, but instead of speaking, she pulled a small spiral notebook from her pocket and flipped to a bright yellow page. Written across it in large block letters were the words, "Please read," followed by a neat flowchart she had drawn with colored markers. The bailiff carried the notebook to the bench, and the judge followed the arrows. Blakely's house, loose fence board, shed window, missing watch, hidden floor. "Your Honor," Ruby finally whispered, forcing sound past the wall of fear. "Scout can show the rest." She tapped 2 fingers against her thigh, the instruction for trace path. Scout trotted to the gallery, nose to the floor, and stopped beside Mr. Blakely, pawing gently at the man's briefcase. Blakely tried to push the dog away, but Barrett ordered him to open the case for inspection. Inside lay a folded journal and a tube of wood glue, both items smelling sharply of the same cinnamon and brass scent as the watch. Gasps rippled again. Even Mrs. Pennington's handkerchief paused midair. Ruby's dad leaned forward, eyes shining with dawning hope that felt like spring sunlight after a long storm. The judge invited Ruby to approach, and though her legs trembled, she walked to the stand, Scout matching her pace like a living shadow. She explained how she had seen Blakely working on the fence the afternoon before the theft and noticed glue stains on his cuffs. She had collected shavings from the loose board, matched them to the glue in his trash, and trained Scout to track the unique smell. Mr. Harrow objected, claiming the girl's story was fantasy, but Barrett waved him silent, more interested in facts than volume. Ruby handed over a plastic evidence bag containing the stained shavings and a printed photo of Blakely leaning over the fence, timestamped by her phone. Scout punctuated her words by sitting squarely in front of Blakely, staring with big brown eyes that seemed to ask, "Confess yet?" Sweat beaded on the witness's forehead. His gaze darted around the room like a trapped bird. Finally, voice cracking, Blakely admitted he had hidden the watch under the floorboard after dropping it in panic when footsteps echoed, never expecting a dog to betray him. The judge's face froze, not with anger, but with astonishment at the chain of evidence woven by a quiet child and her determined retriever. Judge Barrett signaled the bailiffs, and before Blakely could shut his briefcase, they snapped cuffs onto his wrists with a metallic click that echoed through the stunned chamber. Mrs. Pennington's lips trembled, then curved into a fragile smile as she accepted the recovered watch from a gloved officer. The judge turned to Ruby's father and declared, "Sir, you are hereby released. The charges against you are dismissed with prejudice." Applause erupted, but Barrett banged his gavel once more, demanding quiet so proper procedure could finish. Ruby exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding since dawn, air rushing out like a deflating balloon of fear. Scout leaned into her leg, tail wagging in slow sweeps, collecting gentle pats from strangers who suddenly viewed him as a hero. Barrett removed his glasses, wiped them with his robe sleeve, and studied Ruby with open wonder. "Young lady," he said, "your resourcefulness has corrected a grave mistake. I would like the court record to note your contribution." Ruby's cheeks flushed, but she managed a tiny nod, her tongue still wary of big crowds even on a victorious day. The judge asked how she had discovered the loose floorboard, and Ruby explained she had visited the empty courtroom days earlier during an open house tour, noticing one board sounded hollow under Scout's paws. She had guessed Blakely might hide the watch inside because the spot sat directly under the witness box, away from nightly cleaning crews. Barrett shook his head in amazement, admitting that even seasoned officers missed such details. Reporters scribbled furiously, realizing their morning headline needed drastic revision. Grandma let out a loud praise be, causing several spectators to chuckle and wipe grateful tears. Ruby's dad crossed the room, free of chains, and enveloped his daughter and Scout in a hug that squeezed away the last drops of worry. The dog licked his face enthusiastically, awarding him an official slobbery pardon. Judge Barrett then announced a brief adjournment, stating he needed time to draft an official commendation for the brave team. As people filed out, several children gathered around Ruby, asking how they could train their pets to solve mysteries too. She laughed softly, realizing her once quiet world had opened like a window, catching the first wind of summer change. Scout sneezed, shook his fur, and trotted beside her, ready for whatever adventure the new breeze might carry. 1 month later, the courthouse lawn bloomed with folding chairs and bright banners proclaiming Community Hero Day. Ruby felt her knees wobble again, but this time excitement, not fear, fluttered inside her chest. Scout sat beside her in a shiny new harness embroidered with the words Truth Tracker, a gift from the sheriff's office. Kids from Ruby's school crowded the front row, waving homemade signs shaped like paw prints and pocket watches. Judge Barrett stepped to the microphone, his robe replaced by a crisp gray suit, and cleared his throat over the gentle hum of a portable speaker. He recounted the events of that unforgettable trial, emphasizing how courage does not always roar. Sometimes it walks in on 4 quiet feet. He then presented Ruby with a gold-framed certificate and a small medal shaped like a scale, balanced by a dog bone. Flashbulbs popped, freezing the moment in bursts of white light, while Scout tilted his head as if wondering why humans like tiny suns. Mrs. Pennington, watch safely pinned to her blouse, hugged Ruby and pressed an old photograph of the pocket watch's original owner into the girl's hand as thanks. Ruby promised to keep the photo safe, feeling the weight of shared history settle gently on her shoulders. Reporters asked if she planned to become a detective. She shrugged and said, maybe, which sounded large and possible. Her dad laughed, telling the journalist his daughter had already solved the most important mystery in his life, proving his innocence. Scout barked once, as if seconding the motion, and the crowd cheered. The mayor announced a new after-school program teaching kids how to observe, document, and ask questions, a class inspired by Ruby's careful evidence trail. Ruby scanned the gathering and realized she no longer felt invisible. Her voice still came out soft, but people leaned in to hear it. The gentle girl who once feared attention now held a microphone, thanking the town for believing in facts over rumors. She ended by saying, "Every truth leaves a trail. You just have to follow it," word Scout punctuated with a happy wag. Balloons lifted into the sky, red and gold specks drifting toward the afternoon clouds like tiny promises. Ruby scratched Scout behind the ears and whispered their newest secret cue. "Ready for the next mystery?" The golden retriever pressed his nose into her palm, and somewhere deep inside the quiet girl a door opened to endless stories yet to be written.